think on this podcast and with like us being involved in real estate every single day, we often overlook the nuances of the day-to-day of real estate and how rare for a lot of consumers that we work with this transaction actually happens in their life. Like for most people, it happens maybe 3 to 5 times that they're buying a condo, they're upsizing into a 2-bedroom, they're upsizing to a townhouse, and they're living there for 15 years, or they're upsizing to single family, they live there for 20 years, and then they downsize, and maybe that happens 3 to 5 times in their lifetime. So I think we get a bit excited because we are real estate nerds of talking about like high level stuff like density changing in cities and zoning and like all these things that to a regular consumer probably don't mean anything or kind of are overwhelming to even listen to. So we wanted to today just talk about like the basics of writing an offer. I think this kind of spurred from some conversations we have like weekly with either first-time buyers or someone upsizing for the first time, and real estate can be overwhelming. The price points are like it's a lot. You're spending a lot of money in Greater Vancouver, and the contracts are detailed and they're written by lawyers, and there's a lot of legal jargon in there that don't make a ton of sense. So it can be overwhelming to just receive a DocuSign that says, "Hey, sign here. We're offering $749,000. Go."
Yeah.
So today we just wanted to kind of like talk about important details in an offer, what it looks like to write an offer, and hopefully that can help the first-time buyer who we love working with. But go, Monica.
So what do we want to go through?
Let's just break down the contract purchase and sale.
Right. So first things first, on the very first page of the contract is, well, it's not really considered a page, but there is a cover page to a contract, and it has the costs that the buyer will assume. And those costs, your realtors usually go over with you. It's your legal costs, your property transfer tax, GST if it's applicable, those things, right?
So even that first page is confusing to a lot of people, and it totally makes sense why it is.
It is, yeah.
So the way that I always explain this to people is the first 2 pages now, because they've increased it maybe a year ago, now it's 2 pages. The first 2 pages not part of the contract.
Nope.
These are definitions about the contract. So it talks about like, what does the completion date mean? What does the possession date mean? Why is time relevant? Like making sure all these things happen on time as per this contract. So those are definitions. Read through them, try to understand them. Next, we go to the first page of the actual contract.
Yeah. Page 1, it's got your name on it. It has the seller's name on it. It has how much you have decided you want to offer on this property, what your deposit is going to be, and when your deposit is going to be due. Those are important things. And, this is something that you'll discuss with your lawyer or your realtor, how much you want to offer and the deposit. It's really important to remember this. I have a lot of first-time home buyers do this. I think it's adorable. They put their offer in, maybe we get it accepted, and the next day they call me and they're like, all right, got my deposit check. Where do I drop it off? I'm like, whoa. We have to remove subjects first. Have you had that happen?
Yes.
Yeah, I have that happen a lot. And I'll tell them so many times, I'm like, the deposit, right underneath the amount of deposit, it says how you're going to give the deposit. So in a bank draft form, wire transfer, how this money is going to get into the buyer's brokerage, and then when it's due. Look at when it's due. It usually says within 24 hours of final subject removal.
Yeah.
That means it's due after your due diligence.
Yeah. The other thing that can confuse people on this first page is property information. So underneath your names, it's going to say the address of the property. Then it's going to have a property ID number. And then it's going to have a legal description.
Yep.
These are ways that land titles keeps track of properties, not addresses. They have legal descriptions. For the purpose of not being super confused, just understand that we copy and paste this from tax reports into the offer. These made up words and numbers all together in this long form that it might be, 100 characters. It is a legal description of the property that you're buying solely for
the
land title
subject
purpose.
property. Yeah.
The other thing on the first page that is new this year, you will see, and this confuses people, rescission amount. They think, why do I have to pay 2 deposits? I have $30,000 down here as my deposit, and then there's another $3,000 up here. So this is the rescission amount. This is brand new this year. This is the cooling off period crap that we've talked about numerous times on this podcast.
Cooling off crap. I love it.
But anytime in BC now, once you get an accepted offer, whether it has subjects or not, you have a 3-day rescission period that for any reason you can back out of the contract. And if you use that 3-day rescission period, you owe the seller a 0.25% deposit of the purchase price that was agreed. And this is the number that we have to specify. So every single time you counter back and forth with the seller, that number is going to change slightly by like $20.
Depending on if the price changes. Yeah. If there's a counter and a price change, then that means the rescission price has changed. It doesn't always mean the deposit needs to change. Some sellers might counter asking for a larger deposit for whatever reason. We're going to leave that alone today because I don't want to confuse people. But the rescission amount does change anytime the purchase price changes.
On to the next page.
Yeah.
And let's maybe preface the rest of this podcast, but we will probably skip over pages 3 to 6.
Yeah.
Because there are a bunch of terms that are standard in any contract if you're writing an offer on a property that's on MLS. These are things that we can go through with you in detail, but for the purpose of keeping this podcast short and sweet and educational, we will just be overviewing the details that we are adding in this contract.
Yeah. Right.
So the next page is where you're writing terms and conditions.
Yep. Terms and conditions are your subjects. It's what you want to do usually before removing subjects or before the contract becomes firm, and sometimes something that you want the seller to do before completion. So in the terms and conditions, sometimes you'll have subject to financing, subject to inspection, subject to approving insurance, subject to reviewing the property disclosure statement, subject to reviewing all of the strata documents. So these subjects are something that you and your realtor decide on together, and subject to reviewing title, so that you can feel comfortable with your purchase. Usually you have about 5 to 7 business days for these, sometimes faster depending on what property you're trying to buy. But these subjects are something that you and your realtor can decide to put in. You can decide, you know what, I'm comfortable. I've already reviewed this building 3 times. I know all these strata documents. I don't need to review them this time. Or you can say, you know what, I'm comfortable with inspection. This is a brand new property. I don't feel like I really want to spend a few $100s on inspection. So these things you can remove or add, and that's your choice after, discussing with your realtor. And that's the terms and conditions. Sometimes there might be something that the seller says that they plan to do before completion, like I'm going to repair the bathroom fan before completion. That's something that you would put into that section of the contract, saying seller agrees to repair the ceiling fan in such and such bedroom.
This is where we ask sellers to professionally clean the home before completion. This is where, if you're buying an older home in New West and Vancouver, where oil tanks are very common, this is where we're putting an oil tank clause. And we're going through that in detail of like, what does it mean to have an oil tank clause in term? How does that affect you positively or negatively, both in negotiating this contract, but also after you purchase it and owning that property? Keep in mind that subject removal times. So in a typical scenario, if you're one-on-one with a property that's been on market 30 days, you're probably asking for 7 to 10 days of subject period. This is a date that can make your offer look stronger when you're competing if you're shortening that window. So this is why we always talk to people about like getting financing approved early, working with a mortgage broker that is going to answer their phone at 8 p.m. when you are writing this offer or negotiating this offer to get some clarity on it. If you're competing against a few other offers, shortening that timeline from 7 to 10 days down to 2 or 3 can be the difference of you getting an accepted offer or them working with someone else.
And it's not just because it's faster. You never know what position the seller is in. They might be trying to buy a property too. So that's a really advantageous situation. So that is the terms and conditions. Terms and conditions is where you and your realtor have the opportunity to add in anything else you want the seller to do, or any other disclosures or any other agreements between you and the seller that you want to add to the contract. The contract itself, it's really important to note this, is a template that we're given, and we have to use those contracts. We don't get to make up our own contract. This is an outline, and we absolutely have to use those contracts in order to buy a property on MLS.
Next page is where you put in the completion and possession dates. Maybe define difference between completion, possession, and adjustment dates.
This is important. This is a very common situation that really confuses first-time home buyers. So completion is the day that you will pay the seller for this property. On completion day, the funds should be in the seller's bank before 5 p.m. That's completion. It's usually a few days before possession, at least one. So typically speaking, you would complete on one day. The seller and their lawyers would be able to confirm that they've received funds, and then the following day they would give you keys. Sometimes these days can change. Sometimes completion can be several days before, because then the seller has to complete on another property before they can give you possession of theirs, which brings us to possession. Possession day is the day that you get keys. Possession day is the fun day where you get to go with your friends and family and your realtor, and you get the keys and you officially live in the home. So completion day, you pay for it. Possession day, you get the keys. Adjustment day is usually possession day. And the reason why they've added in the adjustment day is because sometimes you will complete several days before possession. And it's not really fair if you complete 4 days before possession if you are paying the seller's strata fee for 4 days, or if you're paying the seller's, electric bill or taxes for 4 days. So the adjustment day is the day that the lawyers get to prorate things. So they'll prorate things like taxes, and they'll prorate things like strata fees, and the adjustments will come out on possession days. So the day that you get keys is your physical day inside the home, and that's the day that you physically start paying for things like strata fees and taxes.
Excellent. Next section, right below completion possession date, is included items. This is where you're writing in all the appliances. This is where you're asking for the backyard shed. This is where you are asking for TV wall mounts or
blinds, curtains,
light fixtures, garage remotes, all keys,
mail keys, and all of the appliances in the basement suite, like the freezer and the wine fridge and the microwave. Yeah.
Be specific here. If there are things that you want, or maybe listing agents as you go through an open house have said, yeah, they're willing to leave this couch behind and you really like this couch, write it into this section. Yeah. Last weekend I was at an open house and there's a sauna on a balcony, like one of those standalone saunas. And the listing agent said they don't really want to move the sauna. So the buyer can take it. So we write an offer and include the sauna in that section of included items. Otherwise, if you don't, or if there's gray area about something, the seller may sell that item prior to completion.
They may sell it. They may have a going away party and one of their brothers decides they really want the sauna, and he says, well, it's not in the contract, and they give it away. So it has to be in the contract. There's also, so that's inclusion. So inclusions is your opportunity to write everything that's not nailed down in the house that you want to be included into the contract. There's also a section right below inclusions that's the exclusions. This is as important as the inclusions. If there is something in the house that you as a buyer do not want to be there, then you need to exclude it. If there is a gross old freezer in the garage and you don't want that gross old freezer, you have to write it in the exclusions. Or if there's an old doghouse in the yard and you don't want the old doghouse to stay in the yard, you need to write it in the exclusions.
Okay, next there's a few pages of standard terms that are templated. We can review those with you in person. We'll skip over those for now. The clause 20A, talking about assignments, I think that's worth noting just to, yeah. Do you want to take that one or me?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. So as of a couple years ago, there are many more rules around assignments, and into the actual templated contract that you would be writing for purchasing a home that's on MLS, they now state a couple things. One, you cannot assign the contract without the seller's written consent. 2, if you do assign the contract, yes, that is confusing. Totally understand. You're not allowed to do it.
But if you do.
If you do, any funds that were over and above your purchase price go to the seller, not to you as the buyer. So you can cross these terms out. If you do, because you have the idea of an assignment down the road, this happens more for pre-sale than resale, or often we will put terms into the contract that a purchaser can add a father or a friend or a spouse to the contract as a purchaser. This is technically an assignment when you're adding or removing or changing names on a contract as a purchaser. So we would cross out that term that says you cannot assign it without seller's written consent. But then there's also another document that we'd have to include with the contract called seller's notice to seller regarding assignment terms that a seller has to sign to acknowledge that they no longer have to provide written consent if an assignment or a name change occurs.
Yeah, this is really important because depending on what the relationship is like between the buyer and seller, if the buyer, if something happens and the buyer realizes after removing subjects that they will not be able to get this property without a cosigner and they need to add mom to the contract, if the seller says, no, I'm not signing that, we're not adding mom to the contract, then the buyer could default on the contract if they're not able to get the property. That's why this assignment clause is really important, and it's important to make sure everyone's on the same page with assignments.
I think last thing noting is just the time that you leave the contract open till.
This one is a big one for me. This one really irks me. Nothing makes me more irritated as a busy realtor and a realtor that really cares about her clients than people sending me a contract that's open for 4 hours. Like you were on the phone with somebody for 90 minutes yesterday explaining, or day before yesterday, explaining a contract. That's 90 minutes. So if it took you 3 hours to get in touch with your client because they're at work and then you had to explain the contract to them for 90 minutes, your contract would have expired.
This is more to get realtors, but maybe just like an education to consumers too, if you're listening to this. Give people time. Allowing them 24 plus hours is not negatively affecting you.
No,
if the offer is really strong, they're going to deal with it. If the offer is really weak, they're not. Like that's it. It doesn't matter what this time is, but you can piss off a seller if you send this happens all the time. Realtors will send an offer at 10 p.m. and they'll leave it open till noon or 3 p.m. or something like that the next day. And your response to them is, leave it open till the end of the day the next day. Like,
you don't know what people's schedules are
and their
like.
response is, well, I give you 12 hours. You're like, bro, first of all, the seller is asleep. Second of all, they have a job. So getting a hold of them at by noon is not practical if they have a job.
Maybe children, maybe a commute. I get that actually a lot from first-time home buyers. So listen up, guys. First-time home buyers, it doesn't make your offer more desirable if you put pressure on the seller so they urgently have to sign your offer. The culture of selling in Vancouver is different than what your uncle who's a realtor in, Prince Edward. Yeah, exactly. The culture is different here. The seller is going to look at that and they're going to be like, oh, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Tell them to change the time. Like it doesn't put pressure on them. They don't believe that if they don't sign it in the next 4 hours that you're just going to walk and like never try to purchase that property again. It's silly.
Minimum 24 hours.
24 hours.
If you send an offer at 6 p.m., leave it open until 10 p.m. the next day. Not noon.
And then it should be changed. If you're in the middle of negotiating, like we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, if things are changing and you're changing prices and you're talking about terms and you see that the negotiation's taking a little bit longer, change the acceptance time. Extend it a few hours, add a day. Just make sure that the most important thing is to have a firm and binding contract that both parties agree to. And if you need more time for that, give yourself more time.
There are very rare cases where including a really short timeline makes sense, like 1 out of 100. Majority of the time, it just pisses off the seller and the seller's realtor, and they're less likely to work with you. You want people to work with you. You want to be accommodating as a buyer. You want to buy this. You're trying to negotiate 10 grand off. You want to be accommodating. Yeah, you do. And then at the very end of the contract is a section where there's more information about the rescission period, which I think is kind of funny. I don't know. When I go through the contract, I sort of feel like it should be on the page with the rescission amount. Like here's the rescission amount and here's where you serve it. Wouldn't that make more sense? They're trying their best. Okay. All right. So anyway, they put it at the very end of the contract for some reason. I have no idea why. But at the very bottom, it says, if the rescission period is exercised, how do we serve notice and who do we send money to? And that's on the very last page. Yeah. Again, keep in mind, this is this year, and this is just a dig at the real estate board because it's fun to do that sometimes. There, on this section, there is name, address, and fax number. Yeah. I usually just put the realtor's email. I put the realtor's email there because that's how I'm giving it to him. I'm not faxing it. I'm emailing it. Serious question though. How many people do you know have a fax machine?
I definitely know of one realtor who's asked me to fax stuff to me before.
In the office or in their personal home, they have a fax machine?
No, in the office.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no,
So none,
like, no
zero.
consumer has a fax machine. That's what I'm trying to get at.
No. Yeah,
Who are we faxing this
we
to?
do hundreds of deals. I've never faxed a contract, nor have I had somebody try to fax me one. Yeah, no.
It's funny because my real estate career started like in this fringe point where DocuSign and electronic signatures were coming in. And there was still a bunch of realtors that would scan documents to you. I've had stuff faxed to me early in my career to like this. We were with Sutton at the time, to the Sutton office, and you have to go drive down there, pick up the paper, get someone to scan it for you so you can actually like work with it.
Oh, wow.
But man, the industry has changed so much in the last decade. But yeah, I would say, what percentage of contracts now are DocuSign? 98?
Most. And
Yeah.
then now a lot of people have apps where they can scan it from their phone
Yeah.
and send it like that. Yeah.
And put it together as one PDF and not 9 different PDFs.
Oh my God, my favorite.
Or 9 different JPEGs, so you have to change everything to PDF.
You're making
and
me
then
reminisce. That's nostalgic. That when I first started, I can't, the feeling I got when I received that contract from a realtor, he was adorable. He's probably retired now, but he sent me a contract and there was about 14 or 15 PDFs. Like the property disclosure statement was separate. The contract was separate pages. It was, yeah, those days are gone, hopefully. Yeah.
It's Cole's Notes version of writing an
Contracts.
offer. If you're a first-time buyer, these documents can be very overwhelming, and that's our job, to explain them to you and kind of walk you through. And we love doing that. So reach out to us if you are thinking about buying in Greater Vancouver. We love this city, and there's a lot of opportunity right now. And we will educate you and spend 90 minutes on the phone talking through an offer.
Yep.